Okay, so we're going to start the exponent units. So we start off with the basic laws of exponents. All right, so take a look at number 1, which is something you should already know. Most of these, 1 through 5, you should really already know. It should just be a review here. So when we have x to the 5th times x to the 3rd, when you are multiplying and you have the same base, my base is x, you add the exponent. So this is x to the 8th power. When you're dividing, such as x to the 5th divided by x to the 3rd, and you have the same base, you subtract the exponent. So this is x to the 2nd power. This is a power to a power, right? You have x to the 5th raised to the 3rd power. So that's x to the 5th times x to the 5th times x to the 5th. And remember, just as before, like we did with number 1, when you multiply, you add the exponents. So x to the 5th times x to the 5th times x to the 5th is x to the 15th power. Now notice, I could also get 15 by just multiplying 5 times 3. All right, so now let's take a look at 4. I have xy in parentheses raised to the 3rd power. So that's xy times xy times xy. So I have x times x times x is x to the 3rd. And y times y times y is y to the 3rd. So when the whole thing is raised to the power, something in parentheses, you have to make sure that goes to each one on the inside. All right, and then the same thing for the quotient rule. All right, so I have a quotient, x divided by y, raised to the 3rd power. You have to remember that that's x over y times x over y times x over y, which is x to the 3rd over y to the 3rd. So when you're multiplying, remember, you add the exponents. So when you have a division raised to a 3rd power, you have to make sure it goes to the numerator and the denominator. All right, so let's write down our rules here. All right, so for multiplication, these are the laws of exponents. For multiplication, when you have x to the a times x to the b, when you multiply, you add the exponent. So this is x to the a plus b power. For division, when you have x to the a divided by x to the b, you subtract. So this is going to be x to the a minus b power. When you have a power, this is a power to a power here. X to the a raised to the b power. So that is x to the a times b power. The next one is the power of a product. When you have a multiplication, the whole thing raised to a certain power, each one inside gets that power. So that's x to the a, y to the a. And the same thing for power of a quotient. When you have a division problem raised to a power, the whole thing, each one, the numerator and the denominator, gets raised to that power. So it's x to the a over y to the a power. All right, so let's take a look at number 1 down here. All right, so I have x to the 8th, x to the 4th over x to the 5th to the 2nd. So the first thing I want to do, this x to the 8th times x to the 4th, since I'm multiplying, they have the same base. When I'm talking about the base, I'm talking about the bottom, right? They both have base x. So you have to add the exponents. That's x to the 12th over. Here I have a power to a power, x to the 5th to the 2nd, power to a power, you multiply them. So that's x to the 10th. And now I have the same bases and I am dividing. So I subtract the exponents. That's x to the 2nd power. All right, so let's take a look at number 2. All right, so I have this quotient with powers in there and this power here. So remember, it's a power. It's a power of a product. So make sure you multiply each one on the inside. So that's going to be x to the 6th, y to the 12th, over x, y to the 3rd. Now notice that in the denominator, the only thing that's raised to the 3rd power is just the y, not the x, because there's no parentheses. So I can divide the x's here. This really has an exponent over 1, so it's x to the 6th divided by x to the 1st is x to the 5th. Remember, subtract the exponents when you divide. Y to the 12th divided by y to the 3rd is y to the 9th power. Okay, so flip the paper over so we can take a look at the back. Okay, so the first one, I cut off the top here. All right, it says 0 exponent. So anything to the 0 power, we should all know, is not equal to 0. That's a common mistake. Anything to the 0 power is equal to 1. All right, so now negative exponents. This is probably new for you guys. So when you have x raised to the negative a power, the rule is to make it positive, it goes into the denominator, so it's 1 over x to the positive a power. And the same thing as if it's in the denominator. If it's in the denominator, I have x to the negative a power. To make it positive, it goes into the numerator and becomes a positive exponent. So that's x to the a power. So basically, what you need to know is that you can move anything from a numerator to denominator, denominator to numerator, just by changing the sign of its exponents. So let's write that down. So you can move any number from numerator to denominator or denominator to numerator by changing the sign of the exponent. Okay, so let's take a look down here at the example problems. So I'm just going to move everything up. All right, so x to the negative 2 power, that's equivalent to, since it has a negative exponent, it goes into the denominator and becomes 1 over x to the positive 2 power. Y to the negative 5th power is equal to 1 over y to the positive 5 power. Now, let's say I want to take x to the 3rd power and I want to put it into the denominator. This would be equal to 1 over x to the negative 3 power. And 1 over y to the negative 4th power would become y to the positive 4th power. So remember, you can move things from numerator to denominator just by changing the sign of the exponent. All right, so let's take a look at this. Oh, and one other thing is this, just really quick. Let's say you have something like this, 2x to the, let's say, negative 3rd power. The only thing that's being risen to the negative 3 power is the x. So this is equivalent to 2 over x to the 3rd power. To move the whole thing down, you would have to have something like this. See, the whole thing is being raised to the negative 3rd power, so then it would be 1 over 2x to the 3rd power like that. Okay? All right, and then obviously this can be simplified more because this would be 1 over 8x to the 3rd because 2 to the 3rd power is 8. All right, so let's move on to the last couple of problems. All right, so let's take a look at 5. We have 2/3 raised to the negative 4th power. So remember that power of a quotient? That is 2 to the negative 4th over 3 to the negative 4th. So to make those exponents positive, remember, you change them. So 2 to the negative 4th will go in the denominator, and 3 to the negative 4th will go into the numerator. So this would be 3 to the 4th over 2 to the 4th. Now, since they have the same exponent, I could write it as 3/2 raised to the 4th power. So notice I went from 2/3 raised to the negative 4th power, and I went to 3/2 raised to the positive 4th power. So when you have a negative exponent, and it's a fraction, all it does is it flips the fraction and makes it a positive exponent. So 1/4 to the negative 2 power, it flips it and becomes 4 to the positive 2 power, because this is actually 4 over 1 raised to the 2 power, which is 4 squared. Okay, so that's it, and we'll work some more on exponents in class tomorrow. All right, have a good night.